Hey guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here, and I'm here to talk about a film, Immortals. It's a little shiny, but I think you can see it. Despite what this says right here, I did not pay $18.99 for this movie, in case you were worried. I got this for $1, and I just didn't want to take the sticker off because I was afraid it was going to leave some residue on the case. So last week I talked about Clash of the Titans, the one from the 1980s, and I figured I might as well go ahead and talk about Immortals since I'm kind of on a Greek mythology kick right now. And this was a very unusual experience for me. For one, I had a friend who saw this movie in theaters, and he really hated it. And hearing him tell me about it was the only exposure to any kind of hype, good or bad, that I heard about this movie while it was out and since it has come out. I had heard almost nothing about it other than what my friend told me about it, and he didn't like it. So I went into this movie expecting this to be like a 1 out of 10, and then I actually pretty much enjoyed this movie as I was watching it. But as I was watching it, even though I did enjoy the film, something was nagging at the back of my head. There was something that was keeping me from saying that this is a good movie. And I knew what it was, but at the same time I couldn't say that. I was saying, I can't say that that's why I dislike this movie, or what is preventing me from thinking that this is a truly great movie, because that would make me a hypocrite. And first I want to say, obviously, you've seen me review a lot of superhero stuff on this channel. I'm a huge fan of comic book superheroes. I'm a huge fan of film superheroes. I like all that stuff. There are a lot of times where I will go and watch a superhero movie and someone will say, hey, what did you think of it? And I'll say, I didn't really like it. And they say, oh, because it doesn't follow the comics, right? And every time they say that, I want to punch them in the face because, number one, it makes it sound like I am incapable of saying that a movie is bad because it's bad. It makes it sound like I am only capable of disliking a movie if it doesn't follow the comic books, which there are a lot of superhero movies out there that are pretty terrible, and they're terrible not because they don't follow the comics, they're terrible because they are terrible. But I don't care if a superhero movie doesn't follow the comics, largely because the comics are already there, and they are always going to be there. I cannot get mad at X-Men 3 for not following the Dark Phoenix saga. You know why? Because I have the Dark Phoenix saga in comic book form on my shelf, and if I want to experience the Dark Phoenix saga, I can go and read it. If I want something different that maybe pays homage to the Dark Phoenix saga, I can watch X-Men 3. It's still not a great movie, but it's taking some of the things from the comics and it's going in its own direction. I don't mind that, so why am I so upset that Immortals basically does exactly the same thing? Immortals, it takes characters from Greek mythology, or rather, it takes names from Greek mythology, and then it changes everything else. I watched the special features on this. There was this little documentary, maybe 5 minutes long, that had a few like historians or professors or something like that talking about what mythology means to our culture. And about halfway into the documentary, you start seeing the director and you start seeing a couple of the actors. They are taking the Greek mythology, but they're putting their own spin on it. And I'm okay with putting your own spin on it. That is exactly what X-Men 3 is. It's taking the rough outline of the Dark Phoenix saga, very loose outline, and it's putting its own spin on it. Now, whether or not it works, that is entirely up to the movie. It has nothing to do with, is it a good adaptation of the source material? It has everything to do with, is it a good film? That's what that is. They're putting their own spin on an existing story, and if you don't like it, you can always go back and read the existing story. So why do I have a problem with it here? Number one, Greek mythology comes from stories that were written thousands of years ago, and most of the time the language and the writing is so old, the prose is just so impenetrable that if I wanted to just pick up the Iliad and start reading it today, I wouldn't be able to do it. And I've tried it before. I've tried reading the Iliad, and it just doesn't work. I can't get through it. There's too many names that I can't pronounce. There's too much going on that I just don't understand because these stories were written so many thousands of years ago that I am no longer part of the target audience. I would say the only people who are part of the target audience are professors who know everything about this stuff. Scholars and theologians, people who study this kind of stuff, they are the target audience. So if I want to read or see a Greek mythology story, I'm going to have to see something that's a little more up to date. And you can do that with superhero stories that have come out in the last 30 years and are only now being put on film. You can't really do that with Greek mythology. And so I'm always a little bit more apprehensive when a Greek mythology movie comes out and it changes a lot of stuff. Now, I watched the Clash of the Titans movie from the 1980s and reviewed it last week, and I didn't have a problem with it there. They took characters and they took concepts and ideas from Greek mythology and they formed their own story. But there was a lot in that that was still recognizable as being from Greek mythology. In the Immortals movie, I can't say that. There is a whole lot of stuff here that is paying homage to Greek mythology, but it is largely unrecognizable as the elements that are from Greek mythology.
So what do I mean by that? You've got this character Theseus. In the mythology, Theseus is a young prince. His father is a king, and then he grew up away from his kingdom. He comes back to his kingdom. He finds out that he's a prince, and then he goes to Crete. He kills the Minotaur, and then he comes back home. He forgets to do something. His father commits suicide, and then Theseus is the first founding hero of Athens. And that is the story of Theseus. The character that we have here, his name is Theseus, but all of that stuff is gone. Absolutely none of it is here. He's not a prince. He doesn't fight the Minotaur. He fights some dude in a bull helmet. I poo you not. I wish I was kidding. But at one point in this movie, he fights this big dude who has a big metal bull mask. And that's their version of the Minotaur. And then he leads this big army against this guy named Hyperion, and then at the end of the movie, the gods teleport him to Olympus for some reason. This character, his name is Theseus, but he bears absolutely no resemblance to the character of Theseus in mythology. Then you've got his baby mama, her name is Phaedra. In mythology, Phaedra was a princess of Crete, and in mythology, I believe Theseus had a kid with Phaedra. Here, she's a seer. She's not a princess, she's an oracle, and she really, again, bears absolutely no resemblance to anything and everything that we know about Phaedra from Greek mythology. This applies to everything across the board in this movie. You've got this guy named Hyperion. He basically wants to be immortal. He wants to, I guess, wipe out all these other people. He says a few times that future generations are going to be filled with his descendants. So I guess he wants the entire future to be traced back to him somehow. It doesn't really make sense, but his big goal is to get this magic bow with unlimited amount of energy arrows, and then with that bow, he can free the Titans. And one of the changes to the story, to the original mythology that this movie does that I think kind of works, instead of saying that the Titans are the gods before the gods, it says that there's a whole group of immortals, and they all had a big war. The ones who lost are imprisoned under this mountain, and they are called the Titans. And the ones who won, they are called the gods, and they live up on Olympus. In the original mythology, the Titans were actually the parents of the first generation of gods. And then they had a big war where all the gods, they stayed up on Olympus, and the Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus, which was actually more of a realm and not so much a place on Earth. And so anyway, in this movie, the Titans are kind of the same species as the gods, and Hyperion wants to release them for some reason, I guess to destroy everybody who's not related to him or something, and so Theseus is trying to stop him from doing that. The gods are also trying to help Theseus along the way, and the gods are maybe the most likable in this movie that they've ever been in anything. I mentioned in my review of Clash of the Titans last week that the gods are quite often petty, selfish children who are just doing stuff because they are bored. And that's what they are in almost every version of every Greek story that I've ever seen. Here, we've got a really good explanation for why Zeus does not want them to interfere with the mortals below. He says, if we interfere, if we start helping them out, then mankind is not going to succeed or fail on their own. He says, I have faith in them, and if they have faith in us, we need to have faith in them, and that means we cannot be interfering with them. Well, a few of the gods interfere anyway, and he only kills one of the gods who interferes. He says, anyone who interferes as a god will be punished, and that's very crucial because earlier in the movie, Zeus was actually pretending to be an old mortal man talking to Theseus. He's not interfering as a god, but he says anyone who comes down there in god form and starts doing stuff to help these guys will be punished. Well, 3 of them do this, and he only kills 1 of them, so that's a little weird. I don't know why he didn't kill Poseidon and Aphrodite, but whatever. But they do this, and they're helping the mortals out a little bit, and in my opinion, this is the most likable that the gods have ever been in any adaptation of any Greek story. Again,
doesn't really bear any resemblance to the Greek gods that we've seen in other stories before, but this is a change that, in my opinion, kind of works. But every other character in this story, like I mentioned, Theseus and Phaedra, don't really bear any resemblance to the characters in Greek mythology. Apparently, Heracles is in this movie. I had no idea. I had to look him up to figure out which character is Heracles, and it turns out he's one of the gods, which, again, bears absolutely no resemblance to the Heracles of mythology, who is a demigod and is not one of the Olympian gods. And then you've also got Hyperion, played by Mickey Rourke, and he's okay here. He's not really a terrible actor, but in my opinion, I've never actually seen him in anything where he's just fantastic either. I'm sure someone out there thinks that he's good in something. I just haven't seen him in anything great yet. Mickey Rourke is playing King Hyperion, and he's a human being who wants to release all of the Titans. In Greek mythology, Hyperion was one of the Titans. Again, this is a problem. It wasn't a problem in the Clash of the Titans movie from the 80s because I felt like they kept enough from the source material that was still recognizable in the movie. Even though they made quite a few changes, it still felt like it was from the source material. To me, the difference between this and, say, The Dark Knight Rises, or the X-Men movies, or really any comic book movie where people complain that it diverges from the original source material, the difference between this and that is that this would be like if somebody said, okay, we're going to make an X-Men movie, and Cyclops, he's got these claws, and he's the leader of the Brotherhood of Mutants, and he lives on this faraway alien world, and his daughter is Lilandra, and one day she's going to grow up and she's going to become the captain of the Starjammer, and somebody says, whoa, that absolutely has nothing to do with the X-Men. You're just taking their names and creating brand new characters. And they would say, yeah, it's okay, but we're just putting a new spin on it. That's not putting a new spin on it. That is creating something completely 100% brand new, and then taking old names and just pasting it on your brand new product. I would have been perfectly okay if this was just an old period piece fantasy story that has a lot of mystical elements in it, but wasn't purporting to be a Greek mythology movie. The problem is, this is purporting to be a Greek mythology movie. And if you're one of those people, if you don't care about Greek mythology, if you don't care at all, and you just want to see a movie with a lot of shirtless dudes fighting each other, you are going to love this movie. It's a very fun, very high-octane adventure movie set in ancient Greece. It's got all of those elements, so if that's something that you're wanting, you are going to adore this movie. But for me, I had a huge problem with it, and it's really my only problem with the movie. And I do have some problems with some character motivations, like why does Zeus kill one of the gods who interferes but doesn't kill the other two? Why is Hyperion going to war with the rest of the world? We know why he hates the gods. We don't really understand fully why he's going to war with all these other people, but whatever. For that matter, the guy who was one of the good guys, he was a soldier at the beginning of the movie. He's part of the good army. He goes and he joins King Hyperion for no real reason that I can tell. He just wants to be on their side. Character motivation is kind of a problem in this movie, but that didn't bother me as much as this movie saying, look, we're a Greek mythology movie, even though we have absolutely nothing in common with Greek mythology. That really bothered me, and it doesn't usually bother me, but like I said, it's different here than it's been in anything else where it doesn't bother me. This is totally different than the Punisher movie with Thomas Jane being a little bit different from the Punisher comics. At least it does bear a resemblance to the Punisher comics. This does not bear any resemblance to Greek mythology that I know, and that's ultimately why I could not say that this is a fantastic movie. I enjoyed it because, like I said, it's a fun adventure film, but it's not a great film for those reasons. The character development is kind of messed up and doesn't really work at all, and also it's just not a good Greek mythology story. So those are my thoughts on Immortals, starring a whole bunch of people. Henry Cavill, this was before he was Superman, I didn't even mention that. The bad guy from the first Blade movie, Stephen Dorff, he's in this. The guy who played Bard from the Hobbit movies is in it. It's got a lot of name actors who you're probably going to recognize. The chick from the third Transformers movie, she's Aphrodite in this movie. So, there's no reason why this movie should have done poorly. And as far as I know, it didn't do very poorly. It seemed to be pretty well liked on Amazon and Internet Movie Database. I checked that out after I watched the movie. It's just that I didn't like it, but that doesn't mean that everyone else isn't going to like it. I think a lot of people probably would like it, especially if they aren't as big into Greek mythology as I am. So those are my thoughts on this movie. I hope that you guys liked this review. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back later in the week with a different kind of video. So I will see you guys then. Have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.